Welcome to News from Down Home, where I talk about news from my hometown, Princess Anne, Maryland. My family had moved to Somerset County, Maryland from Western Pennsylvania in 1903, and we have deep roots there. Now, I moved away in 69. I was 13 years old. Um, but I still regard it as my hometown, and a lot of people I love are buried there still, and a lot of people I love still live there. So let's begin. Marylander and Herald was the paper of record, the newspaper of record until the 1980s. It's one I saw every week when I was young, and it has some very interesting information. Now, Tuesday morning, January 4th, 1916, it reports on something that is kind of a surprising to us today. It talks about to probe Shanghaiing case. Now it says the Baltimore police have asked the United States District Attorney Dennis to make an investigation of conditions surrounding the sending of men to the oyster beds in the lower waters of Maryland. The request followed an attempt on Tuesday to Shanghai Gordon Hoffman of 1123 Linden Avenue, Baltimore. Now, it is conceded by those familiar with the oyster dredging industry that from time to time men are sent down the bay on oyster bungees who leave the city and are worked against their will. Such an effort was being made to send young Hoffman from Baltimore, according to the police, when traffic officer Ryan found him and arrested him on a technical charge of being drunk. To determine just how far this nefarious traffic in Shanghai men has progressed, the investigations will be made by the government. Now, it's really interesting, I think. Shanghaiing is just a euphemism for kidnapping. And occasionally, man, if you go to the Naval History magazine, they have an article from 2016 on the kidnapping of young seamen in Baltimore to be taken to the oyster dredging beds to be forced to work. This kidnapping, this slavery, this is amazing, and this happened right up into the 20th century. So as were kidnapped off the streets of Baltimore, off the streets of Norfolk, anywhere where they could be, either anywhere they could be gotten. Maryland stepped up legislation to regulate methods of filling crews. Shanghaiing still continued. If not forcibly abducted, many a green seaman was fed a line, told a lie. On a Philadelphia street, for instance, one young man, Charles Patillo, was offered a job, but basically they were like press gangs that Britain had. And it is really something that you don't think about is happening here. So Shanghaiing, whether the Naval History magazine says Shanghaiing, whether to fill crews for the Chesapeake oyster dredgers or for seafaring ships. There was a federal Shanghaiing law in 1906, but it didn't stop the behavior from happening. The problem continues. So in November of 1911, Secretary of Commerce Charles Nagel determined the end of practice of Shanghaiing, ordering cutters to apprehend the offenders. So it's really interesting. I'll post the link to the Naval History magazine if you're interested in reading it, and we'll just close there on Marylander and Herald. But let's talk about our walking tour of Princess Anne. Now, what we come to next is a significant house in Princess Anne, and this is on 11748 Mansion Street. And this is Seth Venable's house. Now, Seth Venables was a master carpenter. I mentioned him before. He built this for himself, and it's called Simplicity. They're some of the last handmade houses in town. This was built before the railroad brought mass-produced goods and pre-cut lumber to builders. Now, from an article about the history of homes building, in that era, the only real choice for materials was what was available locally. The lack of transit systems with railroads or highways often meant you built what your land or town could provide. So they used timber from nearby forests, stones from local quarries, clay for bricks and tile, lime for plaster. And there was no manufactured shortcuts, no big box stores to run to, no Lowe's, no Home Depot. So builders had to work with real natural materials that were proven, durable, and beautiful. They aged well, were maintainable, and contributed to a home that looked better with time. So I thought that was very interesting, and you'll see a picture of Seth Venable's house. So I hope you enjoyed watching Down Home, news from Down Home today, and feel free to make comments if you know anything about the subjects I brought up. Post them in the comments. Post your information in the comments and your links. Thank you.